With a winter coat on, Juliana sat buckled in her car seat in the passenger side behind me in our Nissan Maxima. That she thought someone was outside her window. Do children see ghosts? I offer you two terrifying stories. The first from the darkest hour.
In 2005, I was about 9 or 10. My little brother was around 5, or whatever age you are in kindergarten.
Juliana was about 5, same age.
And it was Halloween time. It wasn't actual Halloween. I recall that being a few days later, and for reasons you'll likely understand, we avoided the street where this story took place. My brother and I would walk down this street almost every day. It was just one street over from our own, and the neighborhood led to our school. This was the first year that my brother was in school, so my parents would have me walk to and from school with him on the days they didn't drive us. This was and remains to be a safe, quiet neighborhood in Delaware, which is also a relatively quiet state. We were on our way to school, and we'd left early so that we could stop at the donut shop before getting to school. It was still a bit darker outside as the sun hadn't fully risen yet. As we passed down the familiar streets, we were admiring the Halloween decorations. We couldn't wait to wear our costumes. This year I was Princess Leia and my brother was going to be a tiny Darth Vader. And we really couldn't wait to eat ourselves practically sick on candy. This was something that we weren't usually allowed to have. Walking, we saw lots of jack-o'-lanterns, cobwebs. One house had transformed their whole front yard into a graveyard, while another had a life-size witch standing near the front door and some bats that were suspended from the trees in the porch. Our small town seemed to embrace the holiday, if for no other reason than for the kids in town. As we approached one house, I noticed that they had something very large hanging from the tree in front of it. It looked like maybe a mummy, but it was very unsettling. My family was pretty straight-laced, if you will, rather sheltered and Quaker-esque. We weren't allowed to use fake blood or gore in our costumes, no weapons, and we couldn't watch scary movies, that kind of thing. So I wasn't really sure what I was seeing hanging, but it did scare me. My little brother, too. He asked me what it was, but his voice was cracking. Then he told me that he didn't want to go past the scary lady.
Scary lady, that sounds familiar.
I had to assume that he meant whatever was hanging in that tree, and I actually agreed with him. Whatever was over there looked scary. It wasn't well lit like the other scary houses, and there didn't appear to be any other decorations on or near the house. Taking his hand, I told my little brother to follow me across the street. As we reached the other side, we kept walking, but I turned my head and tried to see if I could get a better look, now that I felt safer across the street. I guess it did look like a woman, at least a person with long hair. Cars were passing by, and now other people were walking the streets, so I studied their reactions. Most people seemed to be impressed as they walked by the houses, as we were. No cars seemed to be stopping. So I decided that it was just a really good, really scary decoration. Still, I hurried our walk to the donut shop. After eating our donuts and milk, we headed to the school, where we lived out a relatively normal day. Some of the other kids passed the same house. We all talked about the hanging, scary woman, while some kids said man or ghost. Either way, we all agreed that it was super scary, and I heard some kids daring each other to trick-or-treat there on Halloween. It wasn't until after school that I realized something was wrong. I grabbed my little brother and we started our walk home, but our parents were outside waiting for us. Some friends that had been with me declined a ride home, and so we got into our car. Our parents were very quiet, and instead of asking us about our day like they normally would, they were just silent. Typically, we would play the rose and thorn game, if you've ever heard of it. If you haven't, it's essentially where you talk about the best part of your day and the worst part of your day. After so much quiet, I asked my parents why they picked us up today. That wasn't today a walking day? My dad said that we would talk about it more when we got home, and then he started to ask about our day. So we started at the top of our days. I can't recall what my rose or thorn was, but I know I hadn't really thought about the house or the woman in the tree until my brother used it as his thorn, saying that he didn't like the house with the scary lady outside. I agreed, but I also felt safe with my parents, so I asked if we could drive down the street, mainly wanting to show them the house with the graveyard. But my parents just looked at each other, saying that we really needed to get home, that we would see all of that stuff on Halloween. Then their attention went to reassuring my brother, who was now crying, that we wouldn't have to go by that house, that we didn't have to see that lady. Once home, I started on my homework, not bothering to get into why my parents drove us home. I didn't think about it until dinner, when the news was on. I had just finished setting the table and went to go watch TV while I waited for dinner. I was going to change the channel, but I saw breaking news flash across the local TV station. Breaking news in our small town. I'd never seen it.
Oh my God.
The news story began by stating that a woman who had apparently committed suicide was mistaken for a Halloween decoration.
Oh my.
My eyes widened, and I heard my mom run from the kitchen and my dad from his office. They sat down next to me, asking that I not tell my brother about the news I'd just heard. I shook my head, acknowledging their request, but then I asked them, "Was this why you picked us up today? Was there really a woman in that tree?" They were now shaking their heads, acknowledging my question. All that I could think about in that moment was that I had just passed a real dead person with my 5-year-old brother. My parents asked if I was all right, and I wasn't even sure, but I told them yes. They hugged me, telling me that they were sure that it was scary for us, telling me not to worry about the woman and that the police and everyone else had taken care of her. I wasn't sure what suicide meant, and I didn't ask. But naturally, as I got older, I put the pieces together. My little brother, he doesn't recall the experience, at least not the same way that I do. When he was about 10, I asked if he remembered the experience, the lady. And he still recalls it as being a lady on the sidewalk, that maybe something was in the tree, but that it was the decoration, the woman next to it, that scared him most. He says she looked gray and cold. She looked like she was hurt, but she was just standing there, waiting for us to pass her. For several years, I tried to tell him that's not how it happened, but he remained steadfast in his claims and in what he saw that day. So my explanation for this difference in our recollection of events is that maybe my little brother did see that woman. Maybe he saw her spirit, while I was only able to see her physical form.
That's a truly terrifying story. It reminded me of one time I was with my daughter. It all started as a regular day. We had some shopping to do, and the plan was to go out to dinner when we were done, but it was starting to get sleety and snowy. We decided to call in takeout, go pick it up, and bring it home to eat. We decided on lo mein and egg rolls at Gin Garden. Small takeout place, has some tables, but we weren't staying this time. My husband got a parking space right in front. There was like 3 parking spaces. We were the only one there. Like I said, it was starting to get really bad out. He left the car going, the heat was going, the windshield wipers were going kind of slowly, and he ran out to pay and pick up the takeout. We had just called it in, so it's going to take a little bit. I was sitting there with my daughter. She was behind me in the passenger seat, Juliana, and she was a baby at this point, like I said, maybe 5. And she was all bundled up. She had her hat on and she's buckled in. All of a sudden, she was motioning to the building. The restaurant is 2 stories. The restaurant we go to, Gin Garden, was at the corner. And then next to it at the time was a gentleman's club. In the day, it used to be where all the gangsters would hang out. They would play cards, they'd do their business. Kind of a busy place. At one time, they even had like a restaurant nearby. But right now, it was more a thing of the past. Maybe some older gentlemen would hang out there. It was dark at this point. I was in the front seat. My daughter was in the back seat. There was nobody parked next to us. I love this because sometimes my husband would park in the alley on the side, and I did not like that. It was dark. It's not a bad neighborhood, but it was dark. I couldn't see him. He couldn't see me. Anything could happen. So I liked that we were parked in front under a street light, but right next to the highway. So we're sitting there, and my daughter, we're both on the passenger side. My daughter's behind me, and she indicates that there's something on the roof. Like I said, it was a 2-story building, not a very big building, and so I'm looking at the roof, and then she said that the person who was on the roof is now next to the car. She's indicating with her eyes, but her head's forward, and she's indicating with her eyes towards her window that he's standing there. The scary man is there. But this was the kicker. And I didn't see anybody out there. It was snowing and it was bad, but we were right under a street light, so I should be able to see the person. But I couldn't see anybody. She was scared. Her chin was trembling. She was making this motion. She said that the man wanted one of us to roll down the window. She said that, roll down the window. That's not something that she understood because she grew up with a remote control. She would say, open the window. But she made this motion with her hands. She said, roll down the window. And then she said that, he was getting more insistent. I said, is he cold? I said, what does he have on? She said that he had on all in black, and he had stripes on his sleeves. And on his pants, the same stripes. I'm thinking jogging suit. So I'm like, oh my goodness. Now, if you picture the typical mob, she said that the man was kind of chubby. He didn't look good. But then he was starting to tap on the window because he was getting insistent that we open the door. Now, at this point, Dan finally picked up the food. He gets in the car, and I'm like, just get out of here. We got to get out of here. And he didn't even ask questions. He peeled out of as much as you can in slush, peeled out of the parking lot, and I hope to God that ghost didn't follow us home. I do believe that children do see what others can't. She described the typical mobster. She was scared. Her chin was trembling. It was the one and only time that she ever saw anything like that. And when I heard the other story, they're young and they can see what other people can't.